And I just want to say this on record, right? Yeah. Every single Islamic finance scholar I've spoken to globally, every single one without a shadow of a doubt, and I've spoken to them and I've asked them the question, do you think Islamic finance in its current guise is acceptable in every time and every place? They said no.
They said no.
Yeah. We allow them, so they are halal. We're not saying they're not halal.
But it's not for
it's
every time.
It's contextual.
Yes.
And in and of themselves, they aren't permissible. Within schools, actually, if you go back even 30, 40 years, or even like financial literacy isn't something that's taught in schools.
It's still not.
Yeah. And I really felt finance was the key to unlocking Muslim success.
In today's episode, I'm really pleased to be joined by a close friend and advisor to us at Kestrl, Umer Suleman, Chief Risk Officer at Wahid, the world's leading and largest Islamic fintech. Umer shared with us his journey from conventional financial services for the likes of HSBC, and of course how he came to Wahid, using all the skills that he'd accumulated there, building the car almost for the road that did not yet exist. He shared with us his frustrations at the Islamic financial services that had come before, and his aspirations and optimism for Islamic fintechs. This is a great episode for anyone who's thinking about launching their own company, whether it's in Islamic finance or just thinking about how they can do something that utilizes their potential to make a difference in the world today. So without further ado, I'm Areeb Siddiqui, and welcome to Muslim Money Talk. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to the podcast, Umer. How are you?
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. Alhamdulillah. I'm very good. Thank you, Areeb.
Okay.
Thanks for having me.
Amazing. Well, thank you for joining us. I don't know if you remember how we first met.
Well, physically, I think wasn't it? You did an event and I came to it. The one in
physically. Yeah, we did a launch. We did the Kestrl launch party back in 2021.
Yes.
You very kindly agreed to step in and be a speaker. I think I called you the morning of the event.
Yes. Yeah.
And you changed up your plans to come by and give a little talk on Islamic
pleasure.
finance, but. We spoke on the phone before then.
Okay.
A few times. So this was, I think, before you were at Wahid.
Okay.
So we had just come up with the idea for Kestrl, and I'd come up with. You clearly have no memory of this, so I'm going to.
You know what it is, Areeb? Alhamdulillah, I end up speaking to a lot of people at various stages.
Yeah.
And at one point, there was a lot of people in the digital banking or space that I was speaking to. But I do remember speaking, but I can't remember the exact conversation.
Yeah, of course. No, the reason I wanted to bring it is that. The sense I get is that you really come across as a trusted advisor to so many people in this space. And that's really the reputation that you had and you still have back in the day. So we had just come up with the idea for Kestrl. I think it was like late 2020 or even before then. So we were looking at launching a digital bank at the time and launching a debit card.
Yes.
And the provider on offer, the largest provider at the time, did a lot of other activities. They didn't just provide debit cards to Islamic fintechs, but to plenty of other companies who were involved in gambling and other kinds of very clearly haram activities. So I was saying, my question to you was, what do we do about this?
Yeah.
Right?
Okay,
is this something you're okay with? And you gave me the bottle argument.
Yeah.
Which was, if you're selling you're creating bottles.
Yeah.
Right. And you can sell it to someone who's going to fill it with water, or you can sell it to someone who's going to fill it with wine. What's the onus on you? Yeah. So that was my first.
Right, good.
My first impression. Our first conversation. So thank you for that.
No, my pleasure. You've gone on to do amazing stuff.
Oh no, but it pales in comparison to Wahid, the world's largest Islamic fintech. So what I wanted to ask you was, how did you find yourself at Wahid? Because you've had such an incredible and varied career, from EY to HSBC, where you're doing a very similar function to as you are now, global head of risk, and now at Wahid as CRO. Was the plan always to move into Islamic finance, or was there like an aha moment?
All right, so I'll let you into something. Early on, even before, I guess, I started my career when I was at university, I knew that I wanted to work in finance. And at that point, this was early 2000s, Islamic finance had just started to become not popular, but you started to see the emergence of Islamic finance in the UK. We had at that time Islamic Bank of Britain, as it was called, rather than Al-Rayyan and HSBC Amana. And I thought, okay, this is brilliant, jump on it, Islamic finance. And maybe we'll cover why I wanted to get into finance as well, because it was an area I really wanted to get into for a number of reasons. But so I saw Islamic finance was starting to come out. And I thought, okay, this is the area we can go in. Alhamdulillah, it ticks all the boxes. But then I started to look into the product, and I spoke to people that I trusted, like scholars, etc., for their view on it. And there were some articles at that time that came out that spoke about Islamic finance, how it's actually practiced. And there was a bit of a gap. There was a bit of a delta in terms of the ideal and where Islamic finance was. And there's a number of reasons for that. And I guess I'm a little bit more mature in my own journey of appreciating the challenges around that. So at that time, I thought, okay, look, I don't want to get into Islamic finance as it was being practiced because of this delta. I would rather work in an industry where if something is wrong, God forgive me, at least I know it's wrong, and I'll ask him for forgiveness, then justifying it to myself. All right. And I'll explain that. So, but I always wanted to avoid actually working in banking. I fell into banking by chance, but EY was where I really kind of cut my teeth. Before that, actually, I worked in the public sector.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I after university, I was on a graduate scheme where they were looking for, talent to work in the public sector, and you had to go through a whole process to get in. And I was working in the London Borough of Croydon. Yeah. So, and alhamdulillah, it was an amazing experience, Areeb, actually, because it really gave me an appreciation for public spending and the difference between how public offices run in terms of finances versus private sector. And then I went to EY. Anyway, so through EY and then HSBC, whilst I did want to get into Islamic finance, but I was still involved. I was still interested, and I really felt finance was the key to unlocking Muslim success, right? So finance was the key to unlocking Muslim success. So I thought, okay, how do I upskill myself? How do I build myself in finance, understanding all the different facets of it, from a public expenditure perspective, from a charity perspective, from the different mechanisms that are available, from a trade perspective. So I got involved with the UK IFC. I'm now a board member of the UK IFC. I met Umer Suleman. I would say, like, without a shadow of a doubt, he's been my mentor from the beginning. He's someone who is a trusted advisor as well, and he's one of those people that kept me honest and really sincerely gave me advice and had that balance between being a friend and being an elder brother. So I met him at Ernst & Young, and then he at that time had started the UK IFC.
Because Umar was running, I think, the EY Islamic Finance program at the time.
That's correct, yes. Yeah. And then he set up the UK IFC to kind of, it's a not-for-profit, and to work to help build the ecosystem around Islamic finance, which was very nascent at that time. So I was involved in running a global program that helped educate scholars on conventional finance. Because what you have in terms of Islamic finance, you have scholars, mashallah, they understand the fiqh, the jurisprudence, but they wouldn't necessarily understand finance in the same way.
Yeah.
How does finance work? All the intricacies of, the Department for Treasury, what they do versus X department, and so on and so forth. So that was kind of building me up in the industry space. At the same time, I was also attached to certain scholars who understood finance, and I was really exploring, okay, how to develop my own Islamic understanding of finance, etc. And so I guess I was building a car for a road that hadn't yet been built, right? So in terms of my development, so I was involved in the industry, understanding the industry, then from the Islamic side. And then back to your original question, how Wahid, through that process, Wahid came along, and I remember Junaid, the founder, alhamdulillah, he was in the UK at the time. This was a few years ago, and he reached out to me for a meeting. And I went into this meeting with him, and I was like, it's been after a long day at work. And he goes, look, we're doing this thing, it's in halal investing. And I just said, listen, let me just stop you right there. If you guys are going to be doing X, Y, and Z, like typical Islamic finance products, and you're going to be doing structured financing, and I said, I'm just not interested. I've had enough of our community being taken advantage of. And he had this big grin on his face, and he goes, no, I really agree with you. And that was the start of the journey. But even before I joined Wahid formally as an employee, Areeb, I was head of the UK advisory board because I really believed in them. And I believe in this point generally, that if people are trying to do good, then you should support them. I think as a community, we're very quick to criticize, and really we should lend our support. So I thought, okay, let me support them. And I do that outside of my day job. So for a whole year, I was voluntarily helping, advising Wahid. And then they were like, listen, can you join full time? And I started originally as the head of the UK. And then as soon as I was in there saying, okay, look, my risk experience, my background came and said, we need to really structure ourselves for growth. And alhamdulillah, because we went through kind of hyper growth, Waheed has a phenomenal story in terms of how it's grown so quickly and so wide. And so the difference between startup and scale up really is around the processes that you put in place, the governance that you have, etc. And so it was a natural fit. My background has always been in risk. I was like chief control officer at HSBC, as global head of risk in various teams. And so it was okay, kind of moved into that role quite smoothly. So that was a very long answer to your question. I'm so sorry, Areeb.
No, but I think it sets us up perfectly for what's going to come in the rest of the conversation. Yeah. But you talked about, you had this idea very early on. You were building this car for a road that didn't yet exist. You already was highly skeptical, like a lot of people, of Islamic finance as it was in the early 2000s, and to an extent as it still is.
Yeah.
These banks that were coming along, and they almost seemed to be just changing the existing products just enough that you could put a halal label on top of them. But you already had this idea that in order to unlock Muslim potential, especially here in the UK, finance was the way to do that.
Yeah.
What gave you that outlook? Was there one specific moment, or just growing up in this country, what you saw?
There was a few things, and I think we're going to, without getting too serious too quickly, right now, I don't know when the recording for this will go out, but what we're seeing in Palestine is a complete, genocide of the people there, right? And it actually takes me back to when I was growing up, and in kind of my mid-teens at that time, there was another atrocity that was happening, which was Bosnia. So as I was kind of growing up, maturing, I suddenly saw, wait a second, Muslims, and the Bosnian Muslims, for want of a better term, they weren't known to be particularly practicing, right? So people may see us and say, okay, Islamic Finance and Muslims in the UK. In Bosnia, they weren't known to be particularly practicing. Despite that, almost overnight, they were turned on by the Serbians, and only for the reason that they had some Muslim heritage. And I remember actually thinking, whoa, what's happening? And my first experience of Muslims being attacked, I remember when I was at primary school, was the Gulf War. And I remember that they were going in and there were people on the other side who we'd identify with in terms of how they look. I thought, wait a second, there's Iraq, then we had Bosnia, and then you start to hear, obviously, as you're getting older, you start to read. I saw what was happening in Chechnya, Kashmir, and it seemed wherever the Palestine situation was happening then, wherever Muslims were globally, they seemed to be under attack. And I thought, well, why is it? Why are Muslims not able to at least be able to have a level of independence or defend themselves, etc.? And then I came to the realization that whoever controls the money controls the world, really. As simple as it is. And without going into too much into it, and from if you're not economically powerful, if you don't have, and even on a micro level, or let's be honest with whoever's listening to this, if you're not able to stand on your own 2 feet at its most basic level, you'll never be able to do anything. You'll move with the wind, right? And so it came back to, how do we make Muslims economically powerful so that at least they have autonomy over their own lives? And it was from that position of, how do we move ourselves away from being weak and oppressed into having autonomy and being able to just live? And so that's why I thought, okay, understand finance. But the problem was, it's like finance is like riba, it's all of these things where Allah talks strongly in the Quran about the prohibition of riba. Like, there's no other sin in the Quran where it says that Allah and His Messenger ﷺ are at war with you. Yeah. And so, okay, how do you navigate this? And it's also like, it's corrupt. Anyway, you look, this is the thing I always say, that, and especially with some of the issues that have happened in the UK, and I say in the West generally, when it came to the financial crisis, it's not just having products which were deficient, but the way business was done in a corrupt way. And so this is what kind of led me to actually trying to know more about finance. The starting point was just to kind of help the Muslim community, at least understand it. How do we give ourselves autonomy?
Why do you think we're so bad at this as a community?
Okay, so if we talk about UK specific, right?
Yeah.
Let's look at the UK specific. If we look at the kind of Muslim journey and kind of the history of Muslims in the UK, socioeconomic migrants, kind of 60s, late 50s, 60s, 70s, coming over from former colonies, normally Indian subcontinent. And the Muslims that came over from the Indian subcontinent generally were from, like I said, economic migrants, but they were here just to work.
Yes.
And right. So their prime reason for being here, work, try and get a better life for themselves, working often as laborers, manual work, etc. They weren't focused on, they hadn't had the benefit of going through an education system the way we have, yourself, myself, and I guess just one generation above us. So they came, financial literacy was low, and therefore their own level of financial literacy is low. What you pass on to your children is going to be low as well, if you think about what's being passed on. So the Muslim community was generally just going to be picking up what they learn. And within schools, actually, if you go back even 30, 40 years, or even like financial literacy isn't something that's taught in schools.
It's still not.
Yeah. Right?
It's still a huge problem.
Exactly. And so if you put that together, and then Muslim community, and then the Muslims also, because of not understanding the products, and then also they generally on the whole, alhamdulillah, the Muslim community is observant, right? In terms of staying away from alcohol, staying away from gambling, staying away from all of these things. And interest is one of them. They're not looking at investment products in the same way. That they weren't experienced with it. They didn't understand how to take advantage from a tax perspective, all of these types of things. And so Muslims are playing catch up. And then it became an issue of actually financial illiteracy kind of got passed down generation to generation.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with what we're seeing at Kestrl. It's just that we're now in a stage where I think we have second generation, third generation, fourth generation children of immigrants who are of Muslim background. For a number of reasons, Muslims in the UK are much more religiously observant than maybe other places in the Western world. Like we saw an Islamic fintech with a lot of backing try and fail in other European countries just because this idea of evolving riba just didn't exist in the community. They didn't understand why it had to happen, so they were fighting an uphill battle with just the idea of an Islamic fintech. So in the UK, alhamdulillah, we don't have that issue as much. People generally know that interest is bad. But the way it shows itself in the community is often people just put their money in current accounts in perpetuity and it just gets destroyed by inflation. Some people are even storing money in cash, right? You'd think it's like really, really elderly people doing it. It's not, right? It's people in, closer to our kind of age who are going down that path. People are interested in investing, but then they're sort of in two camps. They're almost too afraid and they think it's way too foreign. Their risk appetite doesn't go for it. So they're like, look, my literacy level isn't there, so it's not something I can think about right now. And then you have other people who are almost not risk averse enough and they're going for all these sorts of alternative assets that maybe you shouldn't be thinking at if you don't even have the basics right.
Completely.
So they'll just typically it's men, typically it's young men, and they're going for crypto, but not even tried and tested crypto, but all these other kinds of
exotic investment.
These kinds of things.
There's a couple of things around that, Areeb, actually, because I think when you look at Muslim populations in the UK, there's a high correlation between high percentage of Muslims living there and social deprivation. So what you found in some of these areas is that they were susceptible to get-rich-quick schemes. And unfortunately, you'll find that, I remember OneCoin, this is quite well known, they were going into Muslim communities, targeting them, and they found it easy to, because one was the financial illiteracy, but also that hope that you pin on getting out of your current financial situation. And so when someone comes and they say, we can double your money, we can get you a 30, 40, 50% return. And then you come along, like going through all the heartache of compliance and, even ourselves, and we're talking about, okay, you'll get a 7% return, or you got to look at the market and you 8%. If you get a 10% return, that's phenomenal. They think that sounds boring. But that's because they don't understand, right? When someone's offering them, this kind of get rich, you can double your money, etc. And, part of the work that I do with the Islamic Council through the Islamic Finance advisory arm of it, we deal with so many cases, Areeb, of Muslims being taken advantage of, right? They've been actually defrauded, and unfortunately, when you ask them, how did you get to hear about this investment? Oh, it's a brother that I trusted. I used to see him in the mosque. And then they wouldn't ask too many questions about it, etc. This is one of the reasons I did a whole session on how to avoid being scammed, because it's unfortunately in our community is so high for these reasons.
Gosh, and I think that's where the mistrust towards the first wave of, or I don't know if people are calling this, but I'm calling it this, but the first wave of Islamic banks or Islamic finance in this country came about where you had this idea that, okay, we need to do something to serve this community. Maybe at the time, maybe 2.5 million Muslims in the early 2000s in the UK. There was a need for some sort of financial system to serve them. So all these banks began to come up. You had Islamic Bank of Britain, Gatehouse Bank, HSBC launched Amana, Lloyds was doing its own Islamic account. But I think it's fair to say that the reception was a bit frosty from the Muslim population, where I think you had a lot of people who were highly skeptical. I think for the reasons that you were stating, that whether this was truly Islamic. And I know there's differing opinions there.
No, I mean, absolutely. Look, and I do blame that also on the Muslim community, because when you come up with a product and it looks very different to what they're used to, they're like, oh no, but we want it to look the same, work the same, cost the same, all of these different things. But at the same time, they complain about it then being, too different and it's not halal, right? So I'll give you an example. When you talk about, there's a number of home purchase plans providers now. I'm sure you'll be speaking to them as well, inshallah. And their products, they work fundamentally different to a mortgage. And then you'll find them saying, oh, but I'm paying more for it. Or, okay, but, why do I have to share the upside if the property value goes up? Why do I have to share it with the financing, the co-investor or the provider like that? Whereas if you get a mortgage, you don't have to. You see, because they want the same product, but they just want it to be stamped and halal. So there's an issue with the Muslim community. But also, look, I really do appreciate that early generation, the first wave of people who brought Islamic finance products. And Mufti Taqi Uthmani, he knew at that time, even he said it, that, and it's on record, that we allowed certain structures and transactions to get the market moving, and I really respect that. Tariq al-Diwani, one of the first people to have a massive influence on how I looked at finance and Islamic finance. I really pray for him. Alhamdulillah, he's someone I'd consider a leader in Islamic finance.
I met him recently.
That was it.
Yeah,
phenomenal guy.
Yeah, incredible. And his book, The Problem with Interest, I wish it was in circulation more. Because I think is that what you read, or
that was one of the first things I remember. I went to Lewisham Masjid many years ago, over 20 years ago, and he was giving a talk there, and there must have been 4 or 5 people. And Tariq al-Diwani was someone who's a bond trader, someone who's at the top of their game, making lots of money in investment banking, and he gave it all up.
Yes.
He gave it all up. That's sacrifice. And then he was going out to masajid, he was going up and down the country, educating people and saying that, it's nice when you've got a massive packed hall and you're speaking to people who are waiting and cheering for you, but to go in, to a small masjid and there's only 4 or 5 people, and to be passionate about it because he really believed in moving away from riba, right? So I remember speaking to Tariq al-Diwani, and he was saying that, look, he really understands that we want to have the full impact or effects of the Sharia and the problem is when you're living in a regulatory system that doesn't implement the Sharia fully, then you don't have the protection of the Sharia either. What I mean by that is, for example, Islamically, there's no riba, there's no interest if I give you money, right? Under an Islamic system, if you don't pay me back, I've got recourse to get the money back.
Yeah.
Here you don't. And so for anyone who's trying to do it on a large scale, then you are actually, you have credit risk, right? So that was something I understand. So the early generation of people who are trying to implement Islamic finance to get the market moving, and even Mufti Taqi Uthmani, Hafidhallahi, when he said, look, we're doing this to get the market moving, and so we start to see products and we want to see innovation. Amazing foresight. And all of those, the early generation, I have lots of respect for them. However, the challenge and the issue is, that they stopped innovating and pushing.
Exactly.
And that was where the problem is. One of the highly contentious areas of Islamic finance is commodity murabaha, which is effectively like a synthetic loan, or it's structured finance. It replicates a loan in every way, and it's always been contentious. At that time, as a percentage of the global transactions compared to now, it's actually gone higher. So there's more of these transactions happening. And that's an issue, because the people who are involved in Islamic finance should really have pushed to say, okay, look, we need to move more towards where we're getting to. And I can understand that, this concept of gradualism, etc. But if you're not, and you're continuing to push out these products without the right level of education, and I just want to say this on record, right? Yeah. Every single Islamic finance scholar I've spoken to globally, every single one without a shadow of a doubt, and I've spoken to them and I've asked them the question, do you think Islamic finance in its current guise is acceptable in every time and every place, right? As it is in and of itself, right? So, like, for example, the water that you have, that's always going to be halal. There's no issues of it being halal, right? Are the Islamic finance products we have halal in and of themselves in every time and every place? They said no. Because of the context and the situation wherein we've allowed them.
They said no.
Yeah. Because of the context and the situation that we're in, we allow them, so they are halal. We're not saying they're not halal.
But it's not for
it's
every time.
It's contextual.
Yes.
And in and of themselves, they aren't permissible. Every single one that I've spoken to. So, okay, that's fine. But say that. If I went to you and said to you, this chicken's halal, and you're like, okay, cool, and you eat it, but actually it was, the head was cut off with a laser or something, right? And the shahada wasn't said, you'd be like, wait a second, that wasn't what you understood of it.
Yeah.
If I said to you, look, we can't for this reason, and for example, you see the discussion between HFA and HMC, like getting down the meat debate, right? People have the right to know if something has been compromised, rather than being sold to them that this is absolutely Sharia compliant. And this comes back to my earlier point, why I never got into Islamic finance, working in the industry like that, was because if I did something wrong, I wanted those doors of mercy to be left open where I'd ask Allah to forgive me, knowing that it's wrong. Whereas if it's justified to me, I will never raise my hands to ask Allah to forgive me, because I think it's okay. And that's why I was like, okay, I'd rather not work where we're justifying something. I like the idea of disruption and moving things towards where it should be.
Why do you think this happened, right? So these Islamic banks came up, and I think the founders of these Islamic banks understood that this was meant to be a stopgap solution, right? They were doing the best that they could within a financial system that was not created for Sharia compliance. Yeah. But then they always wanted it to move on and innovate. Why did the innovation stop? Because I guess we had, a global financial crisis. HSBC pulled out of the market for a number of reasons.
So look, the financial crisis, here's one thing I always say is that when the financial crisis happened back in 2007, 2008, that was the prime opportunity for the world to see the benefits of Islamic finance. But they never spoke about Islamic finance as an alternative to the global financial crisis, because they actually didn't believe, I'm talking about the financial world generally, as Islamic finance as being that different because of the way it's practiced. Instead, Bitcoin, right, was cited as, okay, this is an alternative.
Yeah.
And that's because Islamic finance in practice and implementation, it didn't fulfill that role. And it's a shame actually, because I speak to a number of non-Muslims and they'll say, people who understand Islamic finance, they say, yes, exactly the same, but, where it says interest, they change it for profit. Then I speak to people who work in the technology side, and they say we use exactly the same systems in the back for everything. But even then, look, it's easy to kind of go down this. The early generation, the pioneers of Islamic finance, were trying to do something good. But the problem is you're entering into an arena, right, where you're just imagine a match in a hurricane. A lit match in a hurricane. Islamic finance is very, very small compared to the conventional financial industry. And you've got to really be working together with everyone, have a clear vision in terms of, okay, this is our plan to move away from where we are. Life, bro, honestly, Areeb, like you're successful in what you're doing, you're in it. Other people are entering into Islamic finance because it's successful. They don't all have the same values as you and the same principles as you. So it's easy to kind of lose track if it's making money and people don't ask too many questions. And that's why disruption is important. Like if you look at it, Ramadan comes to us as a month of disruption.
For sure.
Right? To change things up, we need disruption in our lives.
Yeah.
And so in the Islamic finance industry, like what you guys were doing, like mashallah with Kestrl, that disruption, what Wahid came along to do was to disrupt actually, because you need that. And that actually it shakes things up. It makes you reevaluate. And also, I do believe, respectfully speaking, we now have a set of people who've come through the entire system. They understand the education system here, the financial system here. They've worked for 10, 15, 20 years. They've worked in large corporates. They understand who their peers are, who they're dealing with in a different way. So they're not going to accept things in the same way that perhaps the early generation would have. You know, and all of these things you throw in the mix. So respect to the early pioneers. And I think that the ship kind of, they stopped staring it. And that was part of the problem.
When I speak to so many of the practitioners from the past, or they just seem tired. They just seem fed up. And when I talk to them about Islamic fintechs and this response, I feel like Wahid and Kestrl and Fider and all the other Islamic fintechs who've come up recently, it was a real response to the Islamic banks just pausing their innovation. As well as I think we were shown what was possible with the likes of Monzo and Revolut, all of these guys coming up and not just challenging the major banks, but showing that they could actually take a piece of their pies away. And then suddenly we were shown, okay, this is possible. We've all had this innate problem and this feeling, and we've come up through the system feeling like we were underserved and forgotten by banks and investment managers as a whole. Maybe this is what we could do about it. And that was the response to it. But why do you think we are working well together? Not just Kestrel, I mean Islamic Finance 2.0, if you will, the new Islamic fintechs.
I was really thinking about this generally in terms of the Muslim community. And I spoke earlier about Gaza and the genocide that's happening there. And one of the things that's come out from that is the way that it's galvanized the community, that actually despite our differences, there's certain red lines we as a community don't accept. And that's the oppression of what we're seeing in the way that we're seeing it. So unity is possible. And I think that we just need to understand how it works, right? And to do that is, look, at the end of the day, everyone's insane. We're all people. We have the issues of ego and et cetera, et cetera. And that's why you can't, if you're truly doing something for the community, then part of that is working on your own, what we call tarbiyah, right? So your own Islamic development, to understand that you don't become susceptible to the same issues that everyone else has gone down. You don't let your ego overtake you. Actually, what's the bigger picture here? What's your purpose? And you understand that connected to all of this is risk, right? What's your risk? Allah is the one that provides everyone's risk. He's the one that underwrites what you're going to earn tomorrow, what I'm going to earn tomorrow. In our pursuit of something that Allah's already ordained, our responsibility is to ensure that we don't earn our risk in a way that transgresses what Allah wants from us, right? Because look, Areeb, you're always going to be my brother, right? You have rights upon me. FIDA have rights upon me. IFG have rights upon me. Whoever else is in this space, they have rights upon us, all of us. And we shouldn't lose sight of that in the pursuit of what we think is, gain. If you look at the classical scholars, Imam Abu Hanifa, rahimahullah, they say that he used to sell cloth. He was a tradesperson. And someone came to buy cloth from him, and he said to them, he goes, go and buy it from my neighbor. He hasn't made any sales today, right? Who would do that today? Right, because he knew that his risk is written. Even in a modern context, I'll give you an example. At one point, I used to run a coffee shop in Gelateria with some friends.
Really?
Yeah. So run a coffee shop in Gelateria. I wanted to get into real business, etc.
Okay.
And I remember at the time trying to find out information about how to make gelato, etc., and getting coffee. Went to speak to certain people, and they were very candid about it. There was one brother, Allah bless him, I'll say his name, Najib, and he co-owns a brand called Snowflake. Right?
He owns Snowflake.
Snowflake, yeah.
Okay.
He invited me down to their first store, which was in Bayswater. Said, Umer, come down. He showed me how they made everything. He showed us who his chef was, showed us where all the supplies were, completely supported and said, anything you need, you let me know. And we were going into the same business as him, right? And that for me was brotherhood, right? He's someone who understands risk, right? So with various fintech players, right? You know, as they say, a rising tide lifts all ships. We are a dot when it comes to conventional finance. And if we're going to be too busy trying to fight each other, then where are we going to get to?
Know, for sure. I mean, and you guys put your money where your mouth is. Wahid, for anyone who doesn't know, led our most recent funding round, alhamdulillah, which was amazingly successful, and a lot of it was through the publicity and just connecting ourselves to the brand that you guys had built. Similarly, we're talking with many other Islamic fintechs in the space about collaboration.
Yeah,
I was just at Fider's offices last week, just stopping
amazing
in,
guys,
had to find a place to Raza and Sheikh. They're I can't fault them with anything they're doing, and they're helping thousands of people across the community. So, and IFG, Ibrahim, Mohsin. They've got an amazing place in all of our hearts.
Yeah, absolutely.
In helping to really, really tackle the financial literacy issue, which was still, prevails to this day in this country.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, just also mention Yunus from Nesta as well.
Sure.
Alhamdulillah. Again, these are all people that when you speak to, they will try and help you. They'll make time for you, and it's important.
Yeah.
We make time for each other. If there's any way that we can help each other. There's going to be issues which impact everyone. Like one of the key challenges for Islamic finance to really be embedded in the UK are regulatory issues.
Yes.
Right. As a country, we still favour debt over equity, which is key to the development of Islamic products. This is something everyone should work together to actually try and change. There are going to be these issues if we want to disrupt and innovate in the right way, because everyone wants, to be able to come up with better products, etc. Then we need to support each other on these kind of platforms. Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
I want to go back to something that we've mentioned a couple of times.
Sure.
You talked about red lines in the community.
Yeah.
And it seems they are few and far between, but when those lines are crossed, for sure, I've never seen the Muslim community more united than I have in the most recent months.
Yeah.
And maybe you saw it with Bosnia. I think I was too young or too young to remember it, but now what we're seeing with Gaza, it seems like an inflection point in the community where everyone really understands, I think, our place in the world. And I think someone put it really well, that the masks have fallen away.
Completely.
Suddenly, that there were all these people who really champion diversity, and Islam was sort of lobbed in with other D&I initiatives almost. But now it's really seen as othered. What should we be doing? I don't know. It's such a broad question, and I just feel like I wanted to talk about it.
No, let's do it. Let's do it. I think it's really important.
How do we stop this from happening again?
Okay, so there's two parts to the question, right? First part I have to say is, this thing where we felt that we were accepted and we were kind of lobbed into D&I. I think that's an important reminder to us that actually what sets us apart has to be our values and principles and what we call to, all right? It's so important. People think that if we're, involved in society, we're good people, we do our work, etc., then, we'll make a difference. Actually, there's two things there. There was a famous Sheikh Abul Hassan Nadwi, rahimahullah. He's from Nadwatul Ulama. It's a scholarly institution in India. He came to the UK many years ago and he gave a talk to a number of different ulama up in the north. We're talking about maybe 30 years ago. And he said that, if you're just good at your work and you just do what you do, you're just going to be treated like a workhorse. They're going to see you as, oh, well done. Right, you're doing your work and that's all you're going to be. Actually, we need to call society to something better. And when you reflect upon the Seerah and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, no one was more noble than the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He came from the best lineage, right? From the Quraysh. His grandfather was the custodian of the Kaaba. He was the only one. His grandfather used to have a mat, which would be the equivalent of a throne.
Yeah.
And the only one who'd sit in it is the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam when he was a child, right? So he sat in it. He was known as Sadiq al-Amin, the honest, the truthful, even before Nabuwah, even before the prophethood came to him. So he was seen as someone of being noble, someone who was honest and truthful, someone who was charitable, someone who was kind in society. All of these things he was known for. But when he started to call to Islam, it got to a point where he was kicked out of his homeland. Why? Because what you call to is what makes the difference. Just being isn't enough. And there are places when that is enough. So we have to go on the strength of our values and principles. When you said the mask has fallen, what's clear without a shadow of a doubt is that we've been lectured to our entire lives. The whole of the Muslim world is lectured to about what morality looks like. And now everyone can see that actually what's happening is immoral. No one can speak to us about ethics. And so we have to demonstrate and show that this is what morality looks like. This is what ethics actually are in play. So we have to do that. And on a micro level and a macro level, Areeb. So when we're talking about, okay, what can we do to stop it happening again? Every single person in whichever field that they're in, they have to start with the point that it's not enough us just being. We have to use whatever influence that we have in our own way to do something better. So if you look politically, economically, from an education perspective, all of these we've got to be working towards making a difference. So definitely we can. And on a micro level, you see, what we see is happening where land has been taken, everyone can see the oppression. And you can see that there's one group who have gone in and they believe that it's theirs, and now they're attacking the innocent people of Gaza, right? But how many stories are there in our communities, Areeb, of someone taking someone's land? Right? How many stories are there of, families not speaking to each other for decades? The same people will say, that's wrong, but they can't see when they're doing it. And that's dhulm, that's oppression. When you take something from someone that you don't have a right to, you've committed oppression, and that oppression will be darkness on the day of judgment. Now, all of the different ways, Areeb, right? One is something where you usurp someone's land. But even in the transactions that we do, if you sell someone a product that they shouldn't really have, you've taken their right. You've taken their right. If you're not clear in terms of, if this person actually should have this product, right? If you enter into an employment and you sign up to work 40 hours a week and you find that you're only working 5 hours a week, then you've taken someone's right. And Allah warns us about those people who don't give in fair measure, right? So this is what everyone can do. At least make sure that you're not taking someone's right, and then work whatever we can do. And alhamdulillah, look, there has been a global awakening, I think, for sure. People are more aware now, and they're also aware of actually, and I think this is a really important point that should be mentioned. Allah Azza wa Jal tells us in the Quran that Shaitan threatens you with poverty, with fakr. He threatens you with poverty. Allah didn't say that he will make you poor. It's this concept that, you may lose something. And if you look at why people perhaps previously were quiet or they didn't say anything, because they were worried about the impact, or they were worried about that the opposition is some sort of superpower. Actually, you've seen that they're not. And whatever happens, alhamdulillah, Allah is the one that provides, and we need to be brave in what we do. We need to be brave. Yes. And this is how it ties back to actually Islamic finance, believe it or not, and finance, how we understand it. In Arabic, being miserly is seen as being a coward. Being miserly is seen as that there's a relationship between being stingy and being a coward. And so the one who spends is also seen as the one who's brave. And that's how you spend your time, how you spend your wealth, our relationship with our wealth, seeing it from an Islamic paradigm. So we all need to be a little bit braver, actually. we see what we've seen in front of us, subhanAllah, the level of bravery from women and children. That should be an example for us, really.
It is.
In the comfort of our homes, you know.
Yeah.
We're arguing about this stuff. Yeah. But alhamdulillah, I'm really optimistic. Honestly, Areeb, I'm really optimistic.
Yeah.
I don't say that lightly. When I see people like yourself, all the other people in this space, all the other people who are working on the ground, all the people who, from a legal perspective, coming together, going out when there's demonstrations, the number of people who are taking part, we should be optimistic. Islam is optimism.
Yeah.
And we've seen, alhamdulillah, there's a tidal change happening. I think there's a wave of change happening. Everyone just needs to think and ask themselves, where are they in that change? And that's important for us.
Thanks for listening to Muslim Money Talk. If you like what you've heard so far, you might be interested in what we're doing over at Kestrl. Kestrl is a software service that helps banks and wealth managers to better serve their Muslim customers. Maybe it's launching your own digital app, providing it with personalized features for your customers, from budgeting and auto saving, product recommendation, to faith-based features like auto zakat calculation or Sharia stock and fund screening. We have it all here at Kestrl. So join us on our mission of helping Muslims to grow their wealth without having to compromise. So to young people listening who just feel really helpless, and I think all of us have felt helpless in these situations, is your advice to really look at going back to that idea of unlocking your potential?
Yeah.
Look at the opportunities that Allah has provided to you, whether it's your education or where you are. Maybe you're working in a job that you didn't think was that useful. Like you were in a bank and you were worried about riba and all of that. But a lot of that could directly translate to something very entrepreneurial in the Islamic finance space. Would your advice just be to go and grab that opportunity to go out there and do that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would caveat with this. My background's risk, yeah.
Yeah.
So I always say that, look, everyone's context isn't the same.
Sure.
Everyone's situation. And I would never advise someone to do something that puts them at risk, like, in terms of if they've got families, etc., losing that, right? It's got to be measured. You got to understand risk, but do it as in, like, be entrepreneurial. Go out and, like, even if you're doing a side gig, if you're working in a job, think about doing something on the side. Look at the skills that you need. A lot of people just want to do business, but they don't invest in themselves. The greatest investment you can do is in yourself.
Yeah.
You want to go into business, but you don't understand how to read financial accounts, right? Look at that. Understand taxation.
That's very true.
So do these things that upskill you. Like I said, I was building a car for a road that hadn't yet been built. For anyone who's young, think about developing yourself so that when an opportunity arises, you're able to take advantage of it. Number one is in terms of yourself. Number two, learn to save money.
Yeah.
This is the boring thing, right? But, alhamdulillah, you guys have got a fantastic tool. Learn to save money. We live in a time and a society that, we just hand to mouth. You buy, we're so materialistic. We want to spend our money as soon as we get it. We don't have good habits of saving compared to, like, our parents, right? They wouldn't buy something unless they had the money for it in advance. We're happy to get things on credit. Even if we earn money, bang, it's gone.
Buy now, pay later is everywhere.
Exactly.
Whether it's plane tickets or food. Even like take Uber Eats, I saw the other day. You want to buy now, pay later for that? That's incredibly dangerous.
Of course it is.
Incredibly dangerous mindset for people to be falling into.
Yeah.
That, just go into debt.
Absolutely. So young people avoid definitely going into that. But learn to save your money.
Yeah.
Come up with a plan. And so, you're just preparing yourself for when an opportunity arises, you're ready to take it. And again, like, make sure, again, you do shura, you go to speak. Allah tells us in the Quran that if you don't know something, go to those people who know. Learn to ask people.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing people are afraid of doing is asking for help these days. I don't know whether it's pride or fear or whatever gets in the way, but admitting that you're having these thoughts or you're worried about something, that can be the hardest first step for people today. But subhanAllah, look at social media these days. I think we first met, I just DM'd you.
Yeah.
I think that's how, like, half my contacts.
Good.
People who are, like, really good friends and advisors today, it's just like sometimes just cold outreach can go a long way. The thing which inspired me massively has been, I don't know if you know Shazad Yunus.
Yes.
Yeah,
I do.
Muzz has done fantastic work around the world connecting Muslims together, but for the purpose of marriage, But the thing that really got me is I saw when they sent and sponsored ambulances to go into the West Bank.
Yeah.
And there were these bright pink ambulances with the Muzz logo, but it just really struck me as, wow, here we have someone who set up a Muslim company who has been incredibly successful and is now using it to try and make a change. I know it seems very simple, and there's all kinds of people doing that in different ways, but for me, that's always been one of the most important motivations at Kestrl, that with what we're doing, may Allah grant us success so that we can really, really, really push back and start to do initiatives like that. And every single person who's joined Kestrl to this day, alhamdulillah, we're probably, I think, 26, 27 people now, so not quite at your level yet. But
no, alhamdulillah, it's amazing.
They're all sort of united with the shared idea that they could definitely be off somewhere else making tons of money and worldly gain, doing all kinds of things. But they're here because they're trying to make a difference in that way.
And I honestly believe, Areeb, I remember when Kestrl first started out a few years ago, at that time that you came into this market, there were a number of other digital Islamic banks.
There were quite a few.
A number of them, yeah, of which you're one of the very, very few that are still here. And it may be this intention that Allah Azza wa Jal saw that and He wants to give. And so your success is tied to that. And that's so important to understand for everyone generally. Sometimes we think that what we earn and what we have is directly the result of what we do. But actually, Allah Azza wa Jal far exceeds anything that we can think of Him. There's nothing we can think of Allah except that He's greater.
Yeah.
And if you have an intention to do something that pleases Him, Allah Azza wa Jal will never make it transactional. You think that you can transact with Allah, right? Allah will always give you more. He gives us without us asking Him. So when you have this intention, you'll see it manifest itself in your success, really. And I think, alhamdulillah, definitely that must be one of the key reasons that you guys, as well as all the hard work, honestly, that you guys are still around, mashallah, and growing from strength to strength.
I mean, I hope so. I wonder if you could build that into an investment thesis. I think that would be pretty hard to quantify, but alhamdulillah, for whatever reason, we are still around, and we're hoping to do good off the back of that.
Inshallah.
So let's pivot this. We went out really
this
macro stuff, but let's bring it back into Umer. So you've done a few roles at Wahid. You were head of UK, then global head of risk, and now chief risk officer. How has Wahid changed in the time you've been there? Because I think when you joined, it was full focus on the robo-advisory arm and pushing towards your ETF. But it seems like Wahid's gone down all kinds of really interesting directions since then. So what does Wahid do today?
Wahid fundamentally wants to help Muslims manage their money in a way that aligns with their faith. Very simply. And so what we want to do is protect people from harm, financial harm, and at the same time help them grow their wealth in a Sharia compliant, in a halal way. So starting off with ETF, which is kind of mass market retail, in equities which are screened for Sharia compliance. We also have physical gold that we invest in, and kind of fixed income products. So that's kind of retail, but we also actually thought, wait a second, there's a number of entrepreneurs who want to do good, who have an idea, but they don't have access to capital. Now, there's a number of reasons they don't have access to capital. Unfortunately, Islamophobia is a real thing.
Yeah, for
right?
sure.
I've sat, even outside of Islamic finance, I've sat in meetings and I've been privy to conversations where someone, just because they've got the right name and the right look, will have capital thrown at them.
Yeah.
And a Muslim person with a Muslim name, because he has the wrong skin tone, will go in and they're grinding away just to get a little bit of money. Even though they have a phenomenal idea. So we wanted to actually support that. So this is where Wahid Ventures came about. Actually, originally it's Wahid X, then Wahid Ventures, to actually find those gems, find those nuggets, and actually connect them to capital and connect them to the Wahid network. Alhamdulillah, we have around 300,000 customers globally.
Wow.
Right. US, UK, Malaysia, and the UAE. And then we have licenses in Nigeria, South Africa, Indonesia, and alhamdulillah, there's people within those countries who want other financial opportunities, and they want to support as well, because we want to champion the emergence of real, genuine, global Muslim-centered companies. If you look at the top 100 companies, the only quote-unquote Muslim companies is Aramco.
Aramco, yeah.
Yeah. And that's a shame when we make up 25% of the world's population, yet we can't really have one based on ingenuity. We don't have any companies based on ingenuity in the top, 100 companies. So there is a gap there. We need to think big. We need to work hard. And from our point of view, Wahid was there to actually help by giving capital and connecting people to that. And then also the wider network. So that's Wahid in a nutshell. We've started off with just the general investment account. And now, alhamdulillah, we're seeing the emergence of our super app that gives other investment opportunities as well to help people manage their wealth.
And I mean, we saw that firsthand with the capital raising issue. I think when we came up with the idea for Kestrl, we very naively and maybe arrogantly thought people were just going to throw money at this, right? So Dying and I came up with the idea. We were doing an MBA at Cambridge.
Yeah.
We thought, let's create this pitch deck and send it out. We sent it to, I think, 103 different venture capital firms and angel investors, and we only heard back from 3 of them. And all 3 would no, only 1 gave some feedback, which we're very appreciative for. And that's when we realized we got to do something a little bit different if we want to get this off the ground. But to anyone listening, I would say, if you can launch a company without needing to fundraise, go for it. Just because fundraising takes so much out of you. We've just come off the end of a pretty grueling funding round. It takes up 99% of your time. That's all you're going to be focused on doing, just going out, meeting investors, pitching your idea. And it takes away time from the most important things you should be doing, which is talking to your customers and building product. Right, those ultimately, as a founder, is what you should be focusing your time on when you're in the startup phase. So, if you can launch without it, but otherwise, if you come up with an idea and you're looking for funding, I personally can attest to Wahid Ventures. It was fantastic. So I would really recommend it to anyone who has an idea and is looking to launch it.
And connected to that, I mean, your initial deck, definitely set up something, but don't scrimp on the planning.
Yes.
Go through it, actually think through everything. A lot of entrepreneurs have an optimism bias, right? Where they think everything's going to be okay. And you take that time, think fast and move slow. There's a great book on this about thinking fast and moving slow. And that means actually go through everything. Think of, what is your actual target addressable market? Yeah. Be realistic. Why? Because it'll only help you when you're actually implementing your business idea. Sure. And so definitely thinking, like you said, it goes back to speak to people who've been through it. If you find someone who wants to set up a business, if they came and spoke to you, how many learnings have you got that you could teach them now? And that's only because you've trodden the path.
Yeah.
I'm sure that when you started out, you thought, like you said, right, it's going to be we're going to throw money at you, walk past them, but it's not. And then within that, the challenges, Yeah,
for sure. Okay. So that's where Wahid is. Where do you think Wahid, or indeed the Islamic fintech industry, needs to go in the next 5-10 years?
Where does it need to go? I think we need to have more players coming into the market.
Okay.
Definitely, I think we need to have more players coming into the market. Competition is good. Competition should bring the best out of everyone, inshallah. You don't compete for the sake of, just competing. Actually, you want to compete. This is even from an Islamic paradigm. If you've set up your company really with an intention and it's tied to a more noble purpose, then you're happy. You will see that other people's success is your success. You see? And so we need more people coming because we can't address the Muslim community. Look, so there's one thing in terms of providing products. On the other side, why is it that we want to provide products? It's not just good products, but if we don't, then we are allowing Muslims to support and keep their money in haram alternatives. If we knew that the majority of the Muslim world were eating haram meat every day, what sense of urgency would it create in us? Would we say, oh no, listen, those guys, they're providing halal meat. Oh, why are they doing it? They should come to us. No, we'd be like, no, it's good to stop them from eating haram. So people have their money in conventional finance, which is supporting riba. We need to help them and serve them. This market's big enough, 25% of the world's population. It's 1.5 billion, at least maybe 1.8 billion now, right? who's going to serve them? They have a right to living their lives in a way that pleases Allah, right? And that goes across the board, Areeb, yeah? Unfortunately, this is the other, my advice to, or criticism of the early generation of Islamic finance. They only looked for or supported those who had wealth. Islamic finance was for the wealthy.
Yes.
Actually, if you look at the principles of Islamic finance, at its heart and its core is justice. And those most in need of economic justice are those who really get it. Those who are on the lower end of the social ladder. They're the ones who often, when it comes to financing or lending, get the highest rates. Whereas someone who's got lots of money, they'll get it for next to nothing. So we need to be thinking, how do we serve those people? So Islamic fintechs generally, I think we need to have more entrance in this space. I think we need to learn to support each other, be willing to provide guidance to each other, look at how we can have some sort of cooperative amongst the different fintechs, even from a supply side, right? If we're able to supply shared services, etc., be willing to fund fintechs. And I say this to the community generally. You're willing to put your money in conventional financial institutions. If you see someone's trying to do something in a good way, support them. Support them. Don't just be users, right? But people who invest. And when I say invest, I don't mean from a pure like investment product, but invest in our community. You know, support them. Actually, we're quick to pull legs and
be skeptical. Yeah, I think that's what I don't know. So many people are set up to do, but when we recently demoed our new product at Muslim Tech Fest, and I was overwhelmed at how positive the reaction was from there. There are 1,000 or so attendees there. They were critical for sure, but almost in a good way. Like,
good.
This is where I want to see. This is where I think you guys need to go to, which we love. Right? We like thrive off of that kind of feedback.
Good.
So, alhamdulillah, I think things are changing amongst the younger generation.
Definitely.
Community.
I can say, like, look, alhamdulillah, I think pretty much every week I will get a message or a call from someone who's asking if there's a role available or can their kids come and do an internship at Wahid, right? So you see it. They want their children to work in an organization like Wahid, and these are people who've worked as professionals because they see that the environments aren't the same. They know what it's like, etc. But okay, great, you want to benefit from it, but where's the support? Why is that community not coming out and saying, okay, we're going to invest? These are community assets. These are community, trophies from that perspective. So I think we as a community need to start supporting each other from that perspective, on a micro level and a macro level. Okay. I think we need to invest more in people. Definitely. What's happening and what I'm kind of seeing, Areeb, also is that, look, we've got startups, and then from startup to scale up, it's a different journey, right? You really need to almost starting to institutionalize the organization in terms of operations, etc. In that journey, though, from startup to scale up and then beyond, what's easy to sacrifice is the development of people, because you need to move very quickly, right? So you want to bring someone in who can just deliver what you're doing. Our notions of culture, and what do our organizations stand for, embedding that amongst people who've worked in these organizations that go on and actually they can be seen as world class, creating high performing teams. These are things that are going to come about, actually, and we need to invest and develop in people to do that. So when I see more people coming in who are also willing to take a sacrifice, take a chance and work for these organizations to try and deliver some good.
Following that thread, if someone wanted to get into, I get this question pretty much every week from students or people starting out in their careers. If someone wants to do something in Islamic finance, should they go into conventional finance, get some big brands on the CV, get some experience, and then move into Islamic finance? Or should they look to do something themselves or join one of these new startups or scale ups like ourselves?
Me, generally, the advice I give is get experience in conventional, because, to be honest, the development that you're going to get there is very hard to get within the organizations we're involved in, just because of the pace,
For sure.
you
And the
know,
size.
and that's the reality of it. So you want them to understand conventional. You want them to understand the system in which they're involved in and how to navigate it. And the development side is so important. However, if you're going to do that, I would strongly say you need to anchor yourself to a way of getting out, because it's so easy to get involved in conventional financial services, and then after a while money starts to get good, you get comfortable, and then you no longer hate it or dislike it, and then 5 years becomes 10 years, becomes 20 years, becomes retirement. So you've got to make sure that you're in there with a clear mission, that okay, I'm doing this because I need to get out. And then there's certain areas that you can get involved in. I would definitely say even in consultancy is good.
Yeah.
Looking around consultancy, if you're working in PE or VC, etc., then these kind of areas are good to move into Islamic finance. Asset management, again, is important.
Sure. I mean, Capco has a great Islamic finance team. Shout out to Saad and the team over there.
Yeah.
They're, I think, one of the few
Lovely
consultants who are really, really pushing the Islamic finance agenda, or rather that actually have a team still that are fully focused on that, because the others don't really seem to be focused on it that much anymore.
There is one thing, actually, Areeb, just thinking about it. What fintech, the conventional fintech industry, or I guess movement, has shown is that things don't have to be done in the same way that it was done for the last 20, 30, 40, 50 years. Even in conventional. When I was working at HSBC, I remember someone very senior saying that their biggest threat is disruptors, financial disruptors, right? So the fintechs, it was their biggest issue. What that allows you to do is actually come up with products that are fundamentally different to conventional products. They don't have to be labeled Islamic Sharia compliant, because within their nature and their construction, they are Sharia compliant. So that's another great opportunity that we've got to see, okay, what other ways are there of doing things? And there are products now that you see that are out there. I remember with the home ownership, one of the first companies that actually offered genuine Sharia compliant home ownership was started by two non-Muslims who used to work for HSBC Amana, and they set it up because they wanted to actually have a product that was more socially equitable.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And so they were non-Muslims.
It was accidentally Sharia compliant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I remember. Wow, that's incredible. And do you think the way forward is this idea that Islamic finance is just finance? It's just a good product for everyone. It shouldn't just be for the Muslim population. It should be
100%.
the entire world.
100%. If you look at the principles of Islamic finance, when they're implemented correctly, they call to, number one, preservation of wealth. It restricts your wealth from being eroded unfairly. Number two, it moves towards wealth creation. That wealth should be circulating society. Wealth should be benefiting others. It moves towards looking at the weakest in society, right? These are the outcomes of it. Within that framework, you can have lots of different products. So when you speak to society as a whole and you look at how unequal society is now, that the super wealthy, that their wealth grows 10, 20, 30 times, whilst the poorest in society, they've seen the real erosion of any little money that they had. That's an imbalanced society. And if you told them and explained to them what Islamic finance actually stands for, there's no way that they would reject it. But more importantly, actually, if you take it philosophically, Islam came as a solution for the whole of mankind, right? A little bit Zakir Naik there, right? Right.
Brother asked a very good question.
Exactly. So it came as, and there is there's nothing in the Sharia except that it's mercy and justice, and that means finance as well. When these principles are implemented, you will see society flourish in a way that you've not seen at the moment. All we've seen in the last 20 years and 30 years is the financial disparity gap only growing, and actually having real principles of the Sharia, you'll find closes that gap. And that benefits everyone, Like I said before, the last thing you want to do is take anyone's wealth unjustly. And you can do it in so many ways. People don't even think about it. I spoke about people not fulfilling their contracts at work.
Yeah.
You know, you look at conflicts of interest. You look all of these different areas. Actually, taking someone wealth and not giving them a fair return for it. Actually, if you start to have these principles embedded in what you're doing, it'll benefit everyone.
100%. And in that same idea, I want to draw attention to something we probably should have come into earlier.
Yeah.
But you wrote an open letter recently to AAOFI. And to anyone who doesn't know, AAOFI is one of the big global Sharia standards, which is out there right now, which is about the way in which certain companies are deemed Sharia compliant or not, and whether or not there should be an ethical component to that. Because the way you would look, say, if you're assessing Apple or Amazon to see whether it's compliant or not to invest in, from a Sharia perspective, you would look at two factors. One is the source of revenue, how much of it is from interest or other activities deemed non-Sharia compliant. And secondly are the financial metrics, so interest-bearing debt, interest-bearing investment, as well as liquidity. So these financial ratios, which you would take by looking at the accounts of that company. But what's missing there, I guess, is, hey, what if Apple is constructing all of their phones using Uyghur labor camps, right? What if this clothes company or the shoe manufacturer is setting up in a factory with incredibly horrible conditions for the workers?
Yeah.
Or indeed, what if this fast food chain is supporting a genocidal campaign in the Middle East? I thought that was incredible that you guys went and did that. Has there been any change?
Okay, alhamdulillah. So for those people who aren't familiar, like we said about AAOFI is amazing. So it's the auditing and accounting organization of Islamic finance institutions, headquartered out of Bahrain, made up of hundreds of scholars and practitioners globally. It's probably the closest you'll get to what's called ijma' consensus, right? In Islamic finance. And they've worked really hard over the years to develop some sort of framework and to provide these principles. And Islamic finance, as everyone can appreciate, is something that's constantly changing in terms of we're dealing in what's called mu'amalat. These are our social contracts, our financial contracts, etc. These are areas where there's flexibility. And so to apply classical Islamic rulings in a modern context, you really need experts. And they've worked really hard to come up with these set of guidelines, as you mentioned. The challenge was, though, as you said, that there are companies which meet these metrics, but actually they are behaving, quote unquote, unethically, right? And this is a big discussion that I have with lots of people, is that to say something is Sharia compliant but unethical, it doesn't match up. You can't, by its nature, have something which is Sharia compliant and unethical. It should be ethical, because that's how it's Allah's law, right? Allah Azza wa Jal, can you say that something is more ethical than Allah? Right? See, it sounds nonsensical, right? That means either we haven't applied the rules properly, or our understanding of ethics is skewed, right? So here it was why I sent the public letter was to say, look, get support from people around the world. Do other people understand it like this? And it was phenomenal. SubhanAllah, Areeb, I can't tell you the number of people globally, scholars, practitioners, lay people. They said this is something we really wanted. We were thinking about, and that you've done it, we really support it. AAOFI, alhamdulillah, they actually did welcome a discussion on it. They said that actually it is a challenge trying to implement the rules, have a rules base around what's ethical. And I understand that. That's the reality. What you consider ethical, I may consider unethical, and likewise, etc. Where do you draw the line to come up with these rules? But we had a very robust conversation, and the outcome of that conversation is that they've taken it on board. They've discussed it with their Sharia team. They're going to find a way to implement it.
Wow.
And I pushed them on this, to be honest, Areeb, saying that when you look at ethical funds globally, right, they found ways to divest, right? So why can't we? And this should be part and parcel of what we're doing. And it's important why we wanted AAOFI to do it is because they're the ones who set the Sharia standards for all of the the majority of the funds that are out there. That's the change that will then filter down. And so, alhamdulillah, let's see, inshallah. Let's hopefully they do implement it. But yeah, it's important. It's important that we do that. And this is, look, you know, a lot of people are talking about ESG, etc., and ethical finance. It's a shame. It's a real shame that we'll talk about these things without talking about genocide.
Yeah.
Because at the heart of ESG is to protect life and, you know, ensure that, you know, it's people and the environment and the built world, you know, and the natural world all are in harmony, right? But what about something like human life? How can you not, you know, speak to that? So, alhamdulillah, and it's good. And this is why we've got to have conversations. We've got to keep on talking about these things. We've got to be honest with each other. We have to hold each other to account. It's good. Like AAOFI, it wasn't, and I purposefully didn't do it to kind of point the finger at them, but to say, look, I understand it's a challenge. We're all in a situation that's unique. What are we going to do? How are we going to support each other? How do we help each other navigate this? Are we just going to criticize each other? You know?
Yeah, I think it's such an important point because not everyone invests, but everyone's a consumer.
Exactly.
Right. Everyone is out there and they're already voting with their wallets.
Yeah.
We did a recent survey. We interviewed about 1,000 people and we found that today Muslims between the ages of 18 and I think it was 36, they actually cared more about BDS than they did Islamic finance and avoiding riba. It was close. It was like 89% for BDS, boycotting, divestment and sanctions initiatives versus like 74% for Islamic finance. But I think it's really telling of what's happening with our community right now, as well as the impact boycotts are actually having on these big companies. I still hear people saying, "Oh, it's not doing anything." It's not doing anything. You've had Coca-Cola recently fallen foul of this, where they launched a campaign and
Bangladesh,
where it was such a silly thing they did, where it was someone saying, "Oh, we have nothing to do with that country. It's nothing to do with us." You wouldn't be investing millions into a marketing campaign if it wasn't hurting your bottom line.
Of course, Starbucks was the same.
Yeah.
They got impacted 100%. You know, this is one of the things about riba, Areeb. You see, you know, other types of sin. If someone drinks, you see the impact of it. Someone gambles, you can see the impact it has. If you steal from someone, you attack someone, you see this impact straight away. Riba, people don't see it in the same way. And it's that slow death. And we in the West generally are net beneficiaries of riba. Right? We're the net beneficiaries. Ask the developing world what interest has done to them. So when you compare it, why BDS is people are more responsive, because they're seeing unfold live the impact that it has. But just something to say, do you think that those attacks, the military intervention, the military attacks that are happening on the people of Gaza could happen if it wasn't financed?
Not at all. No. You just need to look at the numbers.
Exactly. And that financing comes from where? And so on, you see? And that's riba that supports it. And this is why you understand, like Woodrow Wilson, the American president, said banks are worse than standing armies.
What?
Right? Banks are worse than standing armies. If you look at a lot of the central banks, the Central Bank of France, right? That was set up to fund the war. Every time economies go down, suddenly a war happens, right? And this is why you understand when Allah is so strict against riba, but we don't see it. But when we're seeing death like this, then we're like, okay, no, we've got to do something. And it's good, alhamdulillah, because you can see that people have hearts, they have souls, and they just need to understand and be educated about riba and the impact that riba has for them to feel the same. This is kind of stopping it at its root before it gets to the level that it's grown and you can't do anything about it.
Absolutely. I feel like we could go on for like another 2 hours.
Definitely.
I think we're about to get kicked out the room. So, Umer, thank you so much for your time, for coming down and speaking to us at Muslim Money Talk. And I look forward to having you back very soon.
Inshallah. My pleasure.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much.
Assalamu
Thank you for listening to the Muslim Money Talk podcast. If you like what you heard, then please subscribe to Muslim Money Talk wherever you might have been listening to this. Give us a like and share it with someone who you think might be interested. It really, really helps us out. Thank you, assalamu alaikum, and see you next time.